Hey everyone, how's it going? Kevin here with Push to Talk, and I wasn't going to record a video tonight. I was gonna relax and play some Tales of Arise, but I started thinking a little bit and reflecting on the video that I recorded yesterday, which was the AEW fan reviews Roman Reigns versus the Demon Finn Balor from WWE Extreme Rules pay-per-view that aired last night as well. Reflecting on that video, thinking about some of the things that I said in that video, made me start thinking to myself, like, who is the WWE really for? Especially in 2021. To me, it seems pretty obvious who it's for. I think for most people, it seems pretty obvious, what the target audience or who the target audience for the WWE is. And again, I also don't think this is some big revelation or anything, but there were some key things that stood out in the Roman versus Demon match that really helped me realize, again, who WWE really is for. And I think it's important for us to understand as a pro wrestling community and a pro wrestling audience who this product is really targeted towards, and in hopes that it educates a lot of people, in hopes that it helps mature people, back off a little bit on the bashing on WWE and the bashing on each other, just through purely being informed. But again, this is all my opinion. This is all just my perspective as a jaded old man wrestling fan. But let's sit down and let's get into it. So what is the question here? Again, it's who's the target audience of modern day WWE? Who is WWE really for at the end of the day? My main argument here is obviously the WWE is targeted towards children, a younger audience, as well as targeted towards families, so the parents of said children, and perhaps the 12 to maybe 17 or 18, early teens demographic as well. Maybe the older brother or older sister in this family kind of scenario and situation. So I think to first understand why I think that the WWE is marketed and catered towards a family audience and children, we first have to rewind the clock all the way back to the 90s, back to the Attitude Era of professional wrestling. So back then, I was a WCW kid, tried and true. I loved Bill Goldberg. I loved DDP. I hated the NWO. As I got a little older, I thought they were pretty cool, actually. I started to get it even when there were a million members in it. It was still something that I was into. But, a lot of the other kids my age, they were really into the WWF. That was their jam. But at that time in the mid to late 90s, wrestling was everywhere. It was unavoidable. I remember vividly coming to school on a Tuesday morning and talking to my friends about what happened on Monday Nitro that night, talking to the WWF kids about, what happened on Monday Night Raw, and just, being just generally excited about pro wrestling all of the time. It was very much in that public consciousness at that time, especially young, that younger age group, which kind of goes towards my argument of who modern WWE is for. So obviously, the content of the WWF during the Attitude Era was not for children, right? The content of the WWF during the Attitude Era was very much a mirror and reflection of society during the 90s at that time, as with much of the mainstream media content that came out during that time period, right? I mean, look at MTV leaning more into the grunge and some kind of sometimes heavy metal side of things being a reflection of the culture at that time. Look at the rise of the anti-hero and characters like that. I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the greatest WWE wrestler of all time, was most definitely an anti-hero who fit the mindset and the culture of the 90s perfectly. Look at the rise of trash TV, right? And those trashy daytime television talk shows like Jerry Springer. WWE was, without doubt, mimicking what we saw there as well as, media professionals like Howard Stern and his show had a lot of that racy content. That was very prevalent in the 90s. It was really inescapable. Even as a little kid, you were kind of bombarded with that sort of stuff all the time. So while the content of the WWF during the Attitude Era wasn't necessarily targeting children, I think it's very, very obvious that all of the marketing materials of the WWF at that time were without question targeting young children. I mean, we had toys, we had action figures, we had plushies, we had t-shirts, we had video games. Sometimes you would watch Monday Nitro or WWF Monday Night Raw, and the commercials would be for toys. They'd be like really similar to the commercials that we would see during Ren and Stimpy or Rocko's Modern Life in the middle of the day. Those shows, I think, also mirroring the culture and the ideology of the general populace of the 90s in their own right, but I think that's an entirely different topic here. So my point being that even during the Attitude Era, right, even in a time where WWE produced its best storytelling, its best matches, its best characters, it was still very much marketed towards kids. You look a little bit before that even. I mean, look at the 80s, and look at Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan had his own Saturday morning cartoon, right? So, and look at a lot of the characters from that era. They were very flamboyant and big and very cartoonish in a lot of ways. I mean, look at Doink the Clown, right? So I think, WWE has always been for kids, or at least always marketed towards kids. Yeah, the Attitude Era was, definitely should not have been for children. Kids shouldn't have watched this stuff that happened during that time. We did anyway, because it was the 90s and nobody cared. But it's always been marketed and catered towards kids, right? Let's fast forward and look at the WWE of today. When I finally flipped on Extreme Rules and decided to watch the match between Roman Reigns and the Demon Finn Balor. I always kept an eye on it. I kept tabs because I love wrestling. But the last wrestling show that I watched, which I stormed out of the building, I was in the building during the match between The Fiend and Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell, which was the worst pro wrestling finish maybe of all time. Roman and Demon they may rival that, I don't know. But anyway, that's beside the point. I haven't watched it in a while, right? So I came in pretty fresh here. A lot of the things that I was really struck by right off the bat was kind of the influence that WWE has taken, especially in their character aesthetics and presentation, as well as their wrestler entrances. They've taken a lot of inspiration from MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not necessarily much of a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or comic books or superheroes in general. It's not really my jam, but I do understand the importance of the MCU within mainstream society today. So it does make a lot of sense that the WWE would lift a lot of the elements from the MCU presentation and aesthetic and incorporate it into their product. I realized this really when I was watching like the Roman Reigns entrance and how epic it was, and how totally over the top it was. It looked like a comic book, right? His entrance in the Demon's entrance looked like it was something that was lifted straight out of like a high budget Marvel Disney film. Roman had that red glove on. Everything was like very overproduced. The music was very epic. It had really long and wide camera angles. Everything just felt very grand in that sense. And it also felt very Marvel and very superhero. Now, I'm not bashing on any of those things. I'm not bashing on the WWE. I'm not trying to. I'm not bashing or trying to hate on Marvel or anything like that. But I think, it's a very fair argument to make that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is primarily made for a younger audience, right? Maybe not little kids as much as they probably do really enjoy it, but I'm talking kids who are like 6, 10, 12 years old, right? So it makes sense that WWE, a product that, in my opinion, is catering, especially nowadays, mostly towards children, would lift the MCU as a source of inspiration. Now, the other point that I want to make that I said earlier in the video is that the WWE isn't only trying to entertain and cater towards younger children. I think that when you look at the WWE, they have just enough violence there and just enough adult themes there that it's going to keep the parents of said children somewhat interested. I think the Marvel movies do this really exceptionally well too, and I think like modern Disney films and Disney in general are the masters of this. So what this is doing is providing just enough entertainment for the grown-ups in WWE. We get table spots, and we get factions like the Bloodline and characters like the Fiend and the Demon. But we also get, those very simple, easy to understand stories that are really squeaky clean and not offensive for children. So it's keeping the parents interested. It's keeping their eyeballs on the product. Which in turn is going to say, hey, if I'm a dad and I've got a kid and maybe I watched the WWE growing up and that's the only wrestling I ever really knew, it's a pretty easy thing for me to show my kid and in turn enjoy myself a little bit. When the WWE comes to town, I would say, hey, yeah, let's go check out SmackDown, little guy. Let's go buy you the shirts and the merchandise, and Dad might get a mug for himself. Right? Dad might go get the Divas calendar. I'm totally kidding. That was probably offensive, and I'm sorry. But I think the point still stands, right? So the parents are involved. The parents are being marketed to. You see that in a lot of the advertisements during WWE programming. A lot of those ads are for adults. And obviously we have all of the merchandising and all of the big characters for the kids. Another part of this target audience that I think that WWE is really shooting for is anyone who is maybe between the ages of like 13 and 17, right? Those kids are still definitely going to be interested in the more cartoony aspects. They're definitely going to start understanding a little bit more of the adult themes, although this be them subtle. And I think they're really, even more so than the little kids, really, really going to buy into that kind of Marvel presentation and aesthetic. I think this is absolutely brilliant on the part of the WWE. I think they are marketing geniuses. I think, dare I say, their booking decisions and their storylines play into this target audience extremely well, almost so that it's better than what Disney or Marvel themselves can do. And it makes sense. Look at wrestling through the 80s and through the 90s. It's always kind of been like this to some degree. Now, that all being said, I think I make a pretty strong argument, and like I said, this shouldn't be some big revelation or anything, right? We know WWE is for kids. Hell, dare I say pro wrestling in general is for kids, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But let's take a look then, and I may be, veering a little bit from the point of the video, but let's look at like AEW, right? And let's look at who they're really targeting and who they're going after and who I think they are brilliantly catering to. It's guys like me. I'm 34 years old. I don't have a kid. I'm pretty financially stable and successful in a lot of ways. I've got my disposable income and yada, yada, yada. But I don't have to worry about the content that might offend my little kid, right? I'm just some nerdy 35-year-old guy that's been watching wrestling pretty darn consistently for his entire life. My time of liking things like superheroes and liking things like Disney movies is pretty far behind me at this point. And I'm more interested in things like Nick Gage showing up on AEW and smashing Jericho over the head with a bunch of light tubes. Yeah, that might sound a little sick and a little cynical in a lot of ways, but that's just really what I want to see, right? And you look at the audience and the crowds in AEW, and I always joke, you just see a bunch of Kevins in the audience, right? You see a bunch of dudes like me, long hair, bearded. You see a lot of guys with piercings and tattoos and metal guys and nerds, just nerdy dudes watching as well. But it's all 30 plus year old dudes in those audiences for sure. And I think AEW fits that niche so well, and I'm so eternally grateful for it. So in this video, I don't want to say one is better than the other. That's not what I'm here to say. I'm just trying to say that these are two different products for two very, very different audiences. And both the AEW and the WWE do what they do in targeting to those audiences and playing to those audiences so extremely, extremely well. Maybe WWE even more so. I think that's why they're so successful, because they know the audience they're going for. They know who to be marketing towards. They know how to write the stories so that sort of demographic keeps coming back, and they know how to keep their content, still interesting for the parents, but still okay enough for the kids that the whole family can enjoy, right? So, thanks so much for watching. I hope, I was at least somewhat articulate in this video. I came in here with no notes, just kind of going stream of consciousness. Typically, you'll see me kind of reading off my phone a little bit, but not the case this time. I just wanted to sit down and share some of the thoughts that I had after watching that Extreme Rules main event the other night, and talk a little bit about who I think modern WWE is really for. So again, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please check me out on Instagram. My handle is pushtotalk1. I'm working on getting together a Twitter account. Might actually set that up when I'm done editing and posting this video. I don't know. I've never been much of a Twitter guy, but if I want to grow my YouTube channel, I know that's the place where I have to go. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please share your thoughts. Are you a single 34-year-old dude without kids, that loves WWE and doesn't like AEW? Please talk to me. I'd love to know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me why you think that the WWE isn't for kids and for families. I'd love to have that conversation with anybody, and I'd love to just gain perspective from other wrestling fans. That's the ultimate goal of this channel, right? So, again, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you all again soon.